So good morning to everybody on this beautiful Wednesday morning. Thank you all for joining us at our ASDSA September virtual session. I have a really great guest for us today. Angela, do you want to put your camera on so that I can make the necessary introductions? Thank you so much. All right, fantastic. What I do want to say just before I do the introductions of our guest speaker is that you are welcome to please share questions that you have or comments that you have in the chat box. They're always welcome. And then we'll also give you an opportunity to unmute your microphones and ask questions. But we're asking if you could please just raise your hand if there is something that you would like to ask. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to somebody who has completely inspired me and has reminded me of how the role of the SDF is evolving. And so many of the roles in organizations are being changed, people are being reskilled, they're being upskilled to remain relevant in the business role that they serve in. And I think that Angela Schultz is the perfect example of how the SDF role has actually evolved. So Angela Schultz has been working for Standard Bank for just over 7 years in the role of manager for learning, governance and skills development. She is a skills development facilitator at group level. And I'm hoping that you're going to learn from her today, not maybe learn, but more understand the standard that is being set in terms of the role of the SDF. And may it be a role that you all aspire to. Secondly, Angela is also has been appointed as the ASDSA Gauteng Chairperson. And I believe that once she's introduced herself to you, you're going to see that you're going to be in really good hands, specifically the Gauteng region. We believe that Angela has so much to contribute on a national level too. So thank you so much, Angela, for being with us today and for sharing with us. We're excited to have you as part of the ASDSA team, and we are particularly excited about what you are going to share with us today. So please do take over. I know that you've got a presentation that you'd like to share to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for that warm welcome, Eulaine. You make me blush, and I really hope that I'm going to live up to your standards and make a difference in the organization. I'm really excited with my new role. It's a lot of responsibility, but I'm looking forward to the challenge, and I really hope that today, yes, you may not learn something because everyone understands their role as SDF, but perhaps it gives you a better picture of the role of a corporate SDF in a larger organization. So what I'm going to be doing today is just give you a brief introduction of who I am. And then I'm going to go through the usual role of the SDF and how one manages it at corporate level, and then give you an indication of what skills and attributes that I feel are important for a corporate SDF and any SDF, whether you're working for a number of organizations as a contractor or for a single organization. So without further ado, I'm going to maybe railroad you a little bit. It's going to be a bit of a steam train journey, so I'm sorry if I'm rushing, and you are most welcome to ask questions on the chat or you know, put your hand up and Eulaine will stop me as I go along. Just confirming, Eulaine, you are able to see my screen?
Yes, audio is great and visual is super, thanks.
Awesome, thank you. So my introduction to myself, who am I? I have 16 years, I'm a mom and a grandmother to 2.95 children. My next grandchild is going to be born on the weekend. I am a daughter and a wife and a sister, and I enjoy crafting and reading. I love dancing and theatre and drama, so I have quite a varied taste in in my interests. I used to be a diver, so it's all sorts of interesting things. I like to keep my life interesting and challenge myself. I have 16 years in skills development from an experience point of view. I have 6 years working in a professional body as a staff member, so I understand the ASDSA structures and role quite well. I currently work, as Eulaine said, for Standard Bank for 7 years as their SDF. And from a qualifications perspective, I have my postgraduate diploma, a BCom law, and my normal higher certificate ETD. I also have a certificate in risk management, which I think is important from a risk, understanding risk from an SDF perspective. So as I said, I'm going to take you through the role and responsibilities that I face. So it's pretty much a year in the life of Angela Schultz.
She's muted me on her side.
Someone needing to say something? Okay. So obviously we've got some commonalities in other organizations for SDF, and then the volumes is what is really the difference between the smaller organization SDF and the large corporate. So the function, as everybody is aware, is you're the contact person, you're the first point of call from the SETA point of view to the organization. You're responsible for the mandatory reporting, your WSP ATR. We must form a quality assurance role in terms of the policies and processes. We must make sure that we are aligned to the requirements of the SETAs and the QCTO and all the other structures. We have an accreditation responsibility to make sure that we are aligned and accredited in the relevant qualifications that the organization is interested in becoming accredited for. We play a role from the QCTO perspective in terms of driving the development of new qualifications that are relevant to for me, the banking sector. So making sure that we highlight and we drive that process so that we can go into the scoping sessions and have our qualifications developed and continue as we have in the past with aligned and accredited training. We have a communications responsibility from the SETA, obviously, but through to the business. So informing the business of the funding initiatives and making sure that we optimize the access to the funding that is offered to us from the SETA. And then, of course, we are a resource for skills development, calling you in for your advice and your guidance in terms of outcomes-based education. So for the WSP ATR, mandatory reporting, that's a large chunk of my responsibility, is collating data for approximately 31,000 employees on an annual basis. And just to give you an idea of how we populate the templates when there is such vast numbers that we are talking about. So the challenges that I have is that our information is sitting on various systems. So we have an HR system, we have the normal LMS. We've now introduced a whole bunch of platform training access. We have a triple BE scorecard financial system that we have to match information through from. We have a separate bursary system that sits as an aside of our human capital system. And then we've obviously got our applications for funding, which is unfortunately a manual process at the moment. I am trying to get it into a more automated form so that we can pull things in a little bit more easily for reporting purposes. We have a lot of obviously business input, so you've got to collaborate quite extensively with each and every department. So it is quite a process starting from the October to go and discuss with the organization, this is your learner numbers, this is what we have on system that you are planning for training, what are your intentions for the coming year, explain the process, explain the importance of the workplace skills plan and annual training report. And obviously, we have to have a broader view of what are we doing with the workplace skills plan and annual training report. You have to explain to the business that you are essentially opening up the possibility of funding. And so we have to put as much information and quality information as we possibly can into that report. It's not just a tick box exercise, something that a secretary does on the sideline. It is very important that we have an accurate and as comprehensive view as possible. Also impacting, of course, on explaining why where the SETA goes with that information, forming their sector skills plans, going through to national level where it's the national skills plan, and then impacting on the Department of Home Affairs. So for an organization like Standard Bank, we often have individuals coming over from outside of the country to do either project work or to become, be coached or mentored in a specific business function. And we don't want to cut off our nose to spite our face. So we must make sure that we have the right scarce and critical skills list so that that person is then enabled to come in on a work visa. So it's a little bit of quite a complicated journey to explain, but yes, I want to do it once a year, every year. People tend to get the message.
Angela, if I can just ask, how does performance reviews and performance appraisals, do those influence the selection of learning and development interventions that are selected?
Absolutely. So our staff are expected to, we have obviously our performance reviews starting from the October of the year through to the February. And they are then expected to capture their developmental goals on our systems. We also have an option, I'll explain later, we are quite very much learner-driven learning organization. So we trust that our learners must know what our staff must know where they're going from a developmental perspective. So they are able to go onto our LMS or our platforms and indicate their interest in doing a specific program. Their line managers then notified, and then they can make the financial decisions if it's a financial decision to make, or if it's a free accessible training, they just go ahead and do that.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah.
So I know everyone's seen pretty much the same sort of example of the reports that we fill in on an annual basis, but just to explain from a corporate perspective, the difficulties that we face from the numbers. So first of all, numbers, pulling an annual training report for 31,000 people, we literally have millions of line items, so we can't do the usual Excel spreadsheet and filter and pivot and all the rest of it. So we have to rely on our friends in the coding side of things to do that, all of that filtering and speaking to our templates perspective. So we heavily rely on that coding to get us into the right format that we can submit to the SETA. And just a simple thing like the pivotal program name. As you know, we have a specific drop down in those fields. You have to use a specific naming convention for the reports to the SETA, or it bounces back as an error. So as a silly example, someone has a national certificate in banking or is intending to do the national certificate in banking. However, on the pivotal program dropdown, it's called Insert : banking. That is a typical example of the silly stuff that we have to deal with when trying to make all of that millions of line items feed into a simple report that goes through to the SETA.
And if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned to me previously that you've had to brush up on your coding too.
Yes, this is a new adventure for me, because you know, I'm a little bit old for that, but yeah, so be it. I'm trying my best. That and data analytics is my new target from a developmental perspective. So yes. So from this funding perspective, we've got obviously our mandatory grant funding coming in. It's the ordinary responsibility. We are notified that it is in our holding account. We distribute to the business areas. We record it per levy number. So Standard Bank, as an example, has 9 levy numbers. So it's a bit of a calculation. And then we recon against our EMP 201s per levy number. And we highlight any concerns that we have regarding the payout through to our group tax department. From a discretionary funding perspective, we are expected to inform and guide the organization on optimizing access to that funding. We submit as a business area the applications through to the SETA. We obviously then receive their responses and notify all of the project managers involved in those specific programs. We manage the invoicing process through to the SETAs. We follow up if the SETA comes back and says so-and-so's ID copy is unclear, someone hasn't initialed on page 3 of this learner's document. We have to follow up on that. We record and obviously report through to the business on the discretionary funding that we've made access to, and then remind everyone that closeouts are due so that we submit our closeouts timelessly and we don't risk the loss of our second tranche funding. I would say we have on average maybe 1,000, 1,500 learners minimum on the ground at any one time. And that also employed learners, so that's a minimum. So it is quite a task to keep track of who's left, who's continued, who's absconded, who's given up, and having the reporting back to the SETA accurate. And obviously all other reporting from a tax perspective, etc. Speaking of which, the dreaded SARS, our responsibility is to calculate the tax incentive for our group tax department. We have a projected calculation in June, and then the final due in December. From an alignment and accreditation perspective, it's the usual role of encouraging the use of accredited training, advising the business on what they're signing up for, making sure that we've got the right documents, the policies, etc., and submitting our applications, hosting the site visits, making sure that we manage the remediation that comes out of the site visit if there is any, capturing our assessors, moderators, and the skills programs or qualifications on the relevant SETA systems, following up on visits, and submitting the portfolios of evidence for external moderation. And then obviously keeping with a view on continuous improvement, sharing that remediation with the relevant business area, saying this is what we could do better, this is where we could possibly change the structure. So it's the normal view. I must say that we do lean towards rather using accredited training providers. We are accredited as a training provider ourselves, but it is, as you know, quite some PT. So we would rather sign up for an accredited training provider and having that provider do that all for us. Legislation. So everyone wonders why I studied law. They always think it's a bit of an odd one going into skills development and studying law. So I do believe that understanding legislation is important for an SDF to be able to pick up when legislation is out for comment, or there's the rumblings of changes in our legislation for skills development, making sure that we are there and we influence the decision makers, we lobby for the sector and for ourselves for making sure that whatever is being proposed as legislation is in fact doable and in alignment with what we can do as a business to keep relevant in the skills development framework. So I do believe that understanding and reading legislation is an important skill to have.
I think that that was something that you highlighted in the discussion that we had, and that you were grateful for having your BCom in law, because to read, interpret, and understand is absolutely critical in order to influence. So
absolutely. Yeah. And sort of forecast. Yes, they're saying this. How is it going to affect us in the long term? So overall, I just wanted to highlight to you how integral the SDF role and L&D role is to the success of an organization. So I think people underestimate the influence that you have in business success. So we are sort of front and center in attracting the right people that for the organization from a pipeline perspective. We're building the capacities of the current staff members and those new staff members. We are implementing and making sure that we have the right skills for our new technologies that we are facing much more often nowadays with 4IR and all the rest of it. It is so important that we upskill our current staff and make sure that we are attracting new talent with those technologies. The sense of culture and employee motivation is so important. We've really seen an increase in our staff satisfaction ratings with us introducing all of our learning platforms and driving learning as we have in our organization. It really just ups the employee motivation, particularly in the difficult times that we've faced through COVID restrictions. People have had a little bit of extra time on their hands, and with being able to do learning and development, of that they are interested in and they are wanting to develop in, has really increased the morale in our employees. And then finally implementing and the business strategy, aligning your business strategy, your employee value proposition, and your learning and development strategy is so important to being a very valuable part of the business. And we most definitely, I have seen, we do have a seat at the table now. So with all of the information that you probably are all familiar with, I just thought highlighting some change drivers and highlighting some possible skills that you can think of looking at for yourselves. So digitalization is obviously, it's been an ongoing song that we've been singing for quite some time. The digitalization of learning is a huge change driver, and the resulting number of interventions has made us value the data analytics side of things. So we do need to be able to read and understand what the data is telling us, asking the right questions. And so that is a huge change driver in the role as skills development and L&D. I have seen a very good maturing of the skills as currency philosophy. So we're going from just improving productivity, making sure people can do the job, to making sure that that employee is viewed as a person and has their own interests and their own ambitions. So the business is far more open to understanding that this person must be able to be employable for the rest of their lives. So just as an example for our reskilling initiatives, as you know, we often have newspaper articles and things in the news that say thousands of employees are being retrenched from the banking sector, what's going on. But in the background, we are working hard from an L&D perspective to make sure that, yes, that person is undergoing the normal retrenchment process or restructuring process, which is dreadful. But we are offering them an opportunity to reskill and upskill in any direction they want. If they want to remain in the bank, they can choose something that is relevant to them being more employable within the organization. Or if they are interested in flower arranging, we've had programs for people studying towards being a fitness instructor, plumbers and electricians. We've had a lovely lady who's learned how to make handbags. So, you know, the horizons are open for those people, and it just softens the blow somewhat for that dreadful process of being undergoing a restructuring process and retrenchment. And that being said, you know, the role of the SDF is integral with chatting with your SETA and discussing the fact that this is what's going to happen in our sector. What can the SETA do to support us from a funding perspective to upskill those people and make sure that they are relevant and employable or self-employed at the end of the process? Because that is essentially the spirit of skills development and the framework that we work with. Definitely a drive for learner-driven training and development, which is pretty much discussed already. And then with all of our platforms that we have now, the blurring of the lines between social media and our learning platforms, where learners are allowed to now collaborate with one another. I really do see we're introducing something where we could, you know, could offer yourself up as a coach or look for a coach if you're wanting to be coached. So all of these are being now automated, and you know, people can comment on a program, share a program. They can allocate, so, you know, if they have reporting lines, they can sort of set a learning pathway for their specific business area. So it's a very exciting time to be in learning and development. We've also facing the aging workforce, where we want to make sure that those people can both pay it forward to someone so that we have business continuity, but there again also making sure that that person has a quality of life once they've retired, and again making sure that they can reskill so that they can do a hobby or continue and be self-employed in some other route, and then remain as a business coach, so that we can make sure that we have the skills paid forward into our organization once more. COVID has been a huge change driver, of course, everyone is aware of that. And I do find that there's no longer this elitist approach of, oh, this is a leadership program and we're only offering it to this specific body of people. And, you know, no, the bank teller can't do this. No, this is not appropriate. The shift has been pronounced in terms of opening up learning for all, which is fantastic. So for the skills and characteristics that I find for a corporate SDF, my personal view, agility, sure, agility, you have to be flexible and go, and it's so difficult when we are working in such a structured and rigid environment where we've got these very specific sort of boundaries and red tape that we have to work within, but you have to find a way to be flexible within that structure. As we've mentioned earlier, and understanding at least, if not being able to code, understanding how it works and machine learning, how that works is very important. For our reporting and evaluation, data analysis, tools like Power BI are excellent to be able to work with. So if you can upskill yourself on that, it's a very valuable tool, particularly when you're collaborating with your business areas. Analyzing and interpreting your data, so asking the right questions. What is this data telling us? And we've also mentioned the understanding of legislation. Systems thinking is critical with understanding the decisions you make and the downstream effect that it may have on your organization is very important. Big picture thinking, to use a common phrase. Networking and partnering, also critical, being able to be pulled into those right conversations at the right time. I was chatting with Eulaine about the frustration of people coming to me and saying, oh, we've contracted with this fabulous training provider. They make bicycles and they shoot balloons, and it's a fabulous program that they're offering. How can we apply for funding for this? So changing that mindset with the business to say, call me in before contracting. When you're deciding on what you're going to be learning, call me in and use me as a resource. It's very important. And always just to remember that the relationship with your business and with the ASDSA is a partnership. So especially the ASDSA, I think people forget that it's no longer this command and control relationship. You are there to influence your ASDSA and to make sure that they understand the needs of the sector and drive that relationship, and remind them when they're coming with their rigid points of view that this is not working for us. Let's talk as a sector and find a better way to do this. Always remember that I understand that 70% of, as I can understand, the ASDSA funding needs to be of a pivotal nature. But we always forget that there's another 30% there that we can tap into. And particularly when it comes to the digitization, the programs that we are, the future skills related programs that we want to offer are often not accredited as yet because the wheels turn so slowly from sort of getting something accredited. So remind the ASDSA of that and make sure that you can tap into that 30% for those programs that are perhaps not accredited. As an example, the reskilling structure programs that we've discussed earlier, those are unaccredited, but tapping into that 30% of funding.
Angela, before you move on to the next slide, Melanie has asked if you can share an example of machine learning.
So I'll use my personal example because I understand I'm looking for curtaining recently. And so I went onto the VOLPS website and I had a look at the new line and what have you. And then all of a sudden, here on my Facebook profile, I'm getting reminders from VOLPS to, oh, by the way, we've got beautiful curtains available. And so it's the same with searching on our platforms for training. Someone looking for a program for Power BI as an example, you will get more programs pushed through to you to say, consider this, someone else has looked at this, are you interested in this? So that is an example. I hope that answers your question, Melanie.
It's almost a form of direct marketing, where machine is learning what your preferences are, what your search patterns are, etc. And then you start seeing a variety of that specific thing. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So challenges that we face in corporate L&D, a lot of our platforms offer a sort of a badging and levels, progressing to different levels option. And we have to have a look at whether it's driving the right behaviors. So as an example, we've introduced a Salesforce as a platform to our organization for driving future skills learning. And it offers a badging option, which was fabulously driven by even our top CEO. The buy-in from our C-suite was tremendous. He was our first ranger. So, but the badging itself, is it driving the right behavior? Is it driving learning itself? Because we did, as an example, from a data analysis perspective, we looked at the statistics that we had available to us, and we saw that once a person had reached the ranger status, they no longer logged into the platform. So is this actually encouraging and driving continuous learning, or is it just getting the badge for the badge's sake? So that's one of our challenges. Driving learning pathways. So now that everyone has thousands of programs and short courses and clips that they can look at, driving the business related skills that we want to encourage to make people sort of remain relevant in the organization. So ways and means to drive specific learning pathways, and we're using behavioral economics and behavioral science very well to drive those behaviors as best we can. Reporting is always a challenge. So as I said, trying to upskill yourself on easier ways to do your reporting is important, but it's not only the reporting that's a problem, it's the reporting to business and showing them the picture of what their learning stats are telling them. That's also important. And then I've mentioned the after the fact consideration, always being there at the table in the right conversations to make sure that you can influence and direct people to offer training that is possibly accredited, and we can then tap into funding and optimize our funding access. CPD is a hot topic in the banking sector. We are heavily regulated, and one of the requirements is a CPD, making sure our employees are doing their CPD hours. And so the difficulty now comes in trying to capture those CPD hours, driving the right CPD programs that we want people to focus on and make sure that they are upskilled in the right direction and remain relevant. And then for the SDFs, it's obviously trying to keep up with the speed of business and then pull the NQF structures along with you and make sure that they try and keep up as best we can. Then just as a final remark, I just wanted to always just bear this in mind, that even though we are a role that is always sat in human resources and we think of ourselves as a sort of a people social related function, we are fast moving towards it, learning and development becoming a science, and SDFs need to remain relevant and keep up themselves. Remember the old story of the cobbler's children that have no shoes. Make sure that you are also making concerted efforts to remain relevant. And that is my bullet train finished. So I will stop sharing, and then if there are any questions, you're most welcome to ask me.
Sure, I think everybody has a better understanding now as to what I said, what I referred to earlier with you inspiring me. That is an incredibly large responsibility that you have. And qualifications aside, I think experience has enriched your role, gaining understanding of the business, and then your intentions, being passionate about what you do. I'd like to open the floor up to questions that we may have. We have had one or two along the way. If you would like to ask Angela a question verbally, there we go. Michael, please do unmute yourself.
Hi there, thank you for the opportunity and welcome as our chairperson of Gauteng region, and for a fantastic presentation. It's very insightful and lots of information from your experience that you've given to us. The question I'd like to ask as an SDF is, excuse me, if you were given the opportunity, either representing yourself as an SDF or your organization or even ASDA in your new role, what are the top three, sorry, I've written it down here. What are the top 3 to 5 priorities you would pose to the Minister of Department of Higher Education and Training in terms of the PSET if you wanted to change something or see something different?
Okay.
I know it's quite a wide to put you on the spot, but because you've had so much experience, if there was something you wanted to make changes in South Africa in terms of skills development for the future, yes, what would you, if you were given that opportunity to pose that to the minister in terms of legislation or changes, what would you put forward? What are the top priorities, 3 to 5, possibly, or even more?
Okay. Thank you. Very interesting question, and I would have loved to have reflected on that. But just off of the top of my head, if I was sitting down for a cup of tea with the minister, I would say we are. It's a difficult thing because I've watched the sort of the peaks and valleys in our intentions as skills development over the years. So we push in the beginning of the introduction to the SETAs that, oh, everything is more academic and we need to have more workplace relevant training, et cetera, So we work towards the sort of occupationally directed training and development, which was nominally successful. We have obviously introduced learnerships and et cetera, but business is now fast moving towards the not so heavily weighting your qualifications academically with these short programs that are upskilling the person to remain relevant. So you have to, it's the continuous learning that is so important. So opening up the possibilities for more short learning programs, possibly dread the day non-accredited training is something that they need to consider possibly putting funding towards. The workplace skills plan and annual training report, although I don't want to make life difficult for us as SDFs, I would say that this reporting is not adding value from the questions that the SETAs are asking us. I mean, well, it's not essentially from the SETAs, it's further up the chain. But that information is not rich enough to be able to make decisions on scarce and critical skills in our sector and nationwide. So we need to find another mechanism to be able to actually assess what are people needing to learn in order to find work, because I think that is one of our key priorities, to make people employable, to upskill them so that they can actually find meaningful work. Yeah, that is pretty much, yeah, I'd also like to encourage, we've got our learnership tax incentive. I would also really like for the discussion to be had on possibly incentivizing internships more. So yes, they've got the relevant qualification, but come in and let's be incentivized for hosting them at our organizations without having to go and, aside from the funding aspect, which we are funded for our internships, but having that tax incentive is really a motivator for pulling in more internships. And I do find as a trend in Standard Bank, for instance, that we are having less and less learnerships and more internships. So, and I think that speaks to the systems and the processes not keeping up with business needs. We don't have the learnerships, the registered learnerships to be able to tap into that. So we are hosting more internships. So I hope that is enough for you, Michael. Love to hear your suggestions to the Minister.
Thank you very much. Now I understand that, because I know it's quite a strategic thing and quite a sensitive thing. I'm just trying to think in terms of us as an economy that's trying to grow, and because of the scarce and critical skills, and trying to make sure that there's enough people for every job, and also at the same time for the aging population, the number of people that are also able to get jobs as soon as they leave, and that because there's such a high unemployment rate, also the number of what I've seen is that there's not integration between the different SETAs, because they all got different systems, which is really a hard thing for SDFs to manage, because it's not a uniform system for capturing information.
That's so frustrating, yes.
And also
Absolutely.
that in terms of the different sectors of the economy that have got a need for scarce and critical skills to be filled, that come through all these different WSP and sector skills plans, that they all work in silos. And I think, from a future perspective of being a growing economy and developing economy, that needs to be looked at. But that's why I was just trying to get your perspective to understand what we should be doing as SDFs to help push the needle on that.
Yes, absolutely. I would love a more consistent approach amongst the SETAs, but I'm not one of those who are advocating personally for the abolishment of the SETAs or the combining of the SETAs, which is a lot of what the discussions we've had of late. People are driving, why doesn't in-SETA and bank SETA work together? There are pros and cons, but I do find that there is value in having a separate SETAs.
Thank you, Michael. And all right, I think we've got another question here. So Piwi said, good presentation, and I now have a will to reskill myself in the technology usage as COVID-19 has dictated, and like to extend my welcome to Angela as Gauteng Chairperson. I reside in the province, my chair, so warm welcome there from Sipiwe. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions? If we don't, I may be able to give you some time back. Nothing. I know that Timothy did ask about becoming an SDF. I did pop him a message about that. But of course, he wants to know where they could register for basic coding training. Angela, do you have any sort of insights on that, or are you self-taught under pressure?
So we use a platform called Degreed, and I'm also a fan of Coursera learning personally. I think we've only recently signed up for them from a business perspective, but those two platforms have a lot of short courses that can just familiarize yourself. So it is quite something for my generation to get their head around. So start off simply, get a basic understanding of what it is, and those platforms will be perfect for that. And then you can explore further if you find an interest in it. But from an SDF perspective, I think we do have other people that can do the job. So I'm not expected to be coding myself, but just an understanding of how the background systems work is most valuable. So understanding why is this coming up as an error in my end report? Oh, it's because there's a comma here, or there's it's speaking to a different system, or just being able to read code a little helps. We don't expect everyone to be a expert at the end, but I'm hoping maybe I've got a new career ahead of me.
I think also it gives you more insight into when you're asking your IT department to do something for you, and when they say to you it's going to take 15 days or 2 days, you understand why. So it helps support a little bit of empathy when it comes to that. And then Bonga Corsi, I know that there's also inexpensive coding fundamentals on Udemy. So that's something that you can go and have a look at too. LinkedIn Learning also has quite a few programs on offer. And then Sherilyn is asking you, Angela, how you see the accreditation process change in the future. So not every SDF manages the accreditation process also. So that it's two very different roles, and in your case, it's obviously integrated. So what is your take on the change for the accreditation process in the future?
Wow, I think I've been caught up in the QCTO frustrations. So I'm hoping that we're going to have some changes. I have seen a slight shift in when I've had our accreditation site visits. You have either an assessor who's coming in and seeing the bigger picture and understanding that you are actually achieving the objective of learning and development. So I'm hoping that as we mature, your visits are going to become more sort of an understanding rather than a have you got the right policy? Where's your list of assessors? Where's your list of moderators? Are they accredited? So I'm hoping that that's the direction we're going to be going in. Yes, obviously we have to have the minimum requirements, and it can always be a development. I always believe it's a developmental process. It's not this big stick process. It should be. And if you are getting a site visit where it's becoming a big stick affair, I think you should raise that as a concern and remind the organization who's doing the accrediting that the spirit of what you're doing, rather than, yes, the nuts and bolts are important and you can develop and grow towards that, but let's not be punitive. Let's just look at, are we successfully upskilling people, young people, the older people, and keeping people more employable?
Absolutely. And then Bill Concorsi has also asked a question. I think this is quite critical, especially in an organization as large as Standard Bank. I know that in my experiences working as an SDF, obtaining buy-in from the different leaders or heads of department of different organizations is absolutely critical. Especially for finance, for example, to get them to understand why they need to release 2 million rand to you for a project. So Bonkenko's question is, how do you ensure you get the buy-in from different heads of departments or managers to understand and support the culture of learning and development, and then prioritizing operations?
I think businesses actually seen the importance and relevance of learning and development through the COVID pandemic, and it's been a fortunate outcome of a very unfortunate circumstance. So the circumstances we've found ourselves in has led us to becoming more relevant and more important, and being given more budget. Obviously, I try to come in, and it's a little bit of a low blow, but anyway, I always say money talks. So if you can get those conversations going in your business areas, and you can say, okay, you're interested in doing a whatever course, systems development course in your program. If we go this route, if you use an accredited training provider, we could get money for you for this. You can pay that money forward to something else in your business area. Money always talks. So if you can get that going, and they can see, oh my word, Angela can actually get us bucks. From there, then you can start influencing in terms of the true intention of skills development and driving more relevant training, and meeting the business goals, but also being able to tap into the funding and the other sort of incentives that we have, tapping into the learning, learnerships, tax incentive, etc.
No, I agree. I agree very much with that. I mean, showing a return on investment is critical, but it isn't. It's also not always a return on investment from a financial perspective. So, for example, a production manager, helping him understand that while his team have got the experience, for example, as operators, machine operators, it may in fact increase their productivity in having them go for a qualification or a short course in an understanding waste management and time management and things like that, specific to the role that they play. So an increase in productivity and I mean building morale in a team is return on investment in itself. So yeah, no, 100%. Bonkenkosi, I hope that answers your question.
I think we're asking the right questions now, because we got into the ruts in learning and development when it was classroom-based training of pulling them out of their business area, and it was the dreaded happy sheet of, did you enjoy the meal? Was the table comfortable? Was this facilitator nice to you? Blah blah blah. Now we're asking valid questions, because there's no nice cupcakes during tea time anymore. So we're not talking about the cupcakes, we're talking about the learning and the value.
Yeah, 100%. Sipiwe has got another question for us. Angela, how many learnerships do you roll out in a year in your organization? And how do you ascertain proportional distribution? And then lastly, how fast are your learnerships being registered or enrolled with the SETA?
We have many uptakes. So we've got our employed learnerships, which is focused on making sure that we are compliant from the banking sector perspective. So focusing on our phase compliance. So those, as I said, at any one time, we've got at least 1,000 learners within the system. So obviously there's people on 3-year learnerships, there's people on the 1-year learnership, there's people on internships, we've got employed, we've got unemployed. So sort of from a program level, I think thus far this year, I think we've maybe got 30 programs running. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that's a lot to register and coordinate. And your turnaround time?
Intakes, obviously.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure the turnaround time. Are you talking from sort of
SETA enrollment, I would imagine. How fast are your learnerships being registered?
So we are relying very heavily on our training providers. So they are managing the upload of learners, the registration, etc. So we normally find it pretty fast. Our frustration normally comes at the end of the learnership, where we're waiting for SETA certificates. There seems to be a hell of a delay from SETA side on issuing certificates. And if we've applied for the funding for that program, that also puts us foul of the timeline that we need to submit our closeout reports and the proof of completion. So that is quite a frustration, particularly over COVID. We seem to have, I mean, I've never had a delay from Facet before, but we had a delay from Facet side. I don't want to name and shame the SETAs, but circumstances are also very difficult at the point. So yeah, we've waited up to 6 months for our SETA certificates to come through. So that
delays tranche payments and all that sort of thing too. If you're getting funding from another SETA. So yeah, okay. All right, yeah, well, and I would imagine registration and enrollment of those students would need to happen within the first month. Some SETAs required before the learnership actually kicks off, and then obviously exiting the students can't happen unless they've been enrolled, and then also. There's the internal moderation and then the external moderation verification process and all that sort of thing that needs to happen too. I know that there are some SETAs who are doing it, who were during hard lockdown doing it via video, which is fantastic. But yeah, all the SETAs operate differently, have different standards and approaches to how they deal with the verifications. So. Hey, we're 3 minutes over. Angela, thank you so much. I have no doubt that you are going to add so much value to the ASDSA in Gauteng as well as on a national level. So thank you again. We look forward to many more months of insightful conversations with you and contributions in terms of how you're experiencing your role as a corporate SDF. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much again for attending today. Please remember to register using the link in the chat box for your CPD points. And thank you again. Have a fantastic week.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.